So let's do this. Okay. So Booksmarts, I'll give you a little bit of introduction about myself. Um, okay, so you didn't happen to see my conversation with Destiny, did you?
I did not.
Okay, so um, my name is Adam. I have a law degree. I worked in lobbying for a very brief time here in New York City. I worked as a day trader for a very brief time. Didn't like either of those career choices. I then got into social media marketing. I started my own social media marketing company, and I do content creation on YouTube and stuff like that. And one day I decided to go out and do a live stream of the George Floyd protest. And next thing I know, I'm being streamed on this channel called Woke on Twitch, and like I shot up in views, subscriptions, and all this stuff. We had like 6,000 viewers one day on YouTube and 40,000 streamers on Twitch one day. But Woke is like a multi-stream, so there's like streams from Seattle and all this stuff, and I was just one of them, but I got a lot of attention from that. So, and I've been going to the protests for about, it's been like 8 days, and I've seen a lot of things I agree with. Like, of course, I support the movement, I support the protests and all that, but there are things that I do disagree with, and I have a lot of discussions coming up with people like I'm going to be talking with people who are very on the left, and I want to be able to have discussions with them in a constructive way, and just, my audience in general, because we can get into all this kind of stuff, but my audience, some portion of my audience has a problem with what I'm doing, so I want to be able to talk to them in a way that's productive. But let's before we get into that, let's have an introduction. You can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Booksmarts on Twitch. My name is Noah, so you can feel free to call me Noah. I've done a couple of talks, or I guess a few talks now, with people on rhetoric and optics. Professionally, I made most of my money writing graduate papers and essays for college students. And then I also do tutoring. When COVID happened, a lot of that fell through. And so unfortunately, the position I'm in now is I don't have an office. I don't have a house. I'm kind of waiting for things to pick back up on my feet. But in the meantime, I figure since I have a lot of free time and people like picking my brain, Twitch has been really fun. It's been cool to meet people like yourself, Destiny, Mindwaves, Dylan Burns. There's just so many really cool people on here that I've been able to connect with. And I think help bridge a gap between people and don't understand them I'm communicating with, I feel like is something I might uniquely be able since I position myself on the platform such that I don't really lean one way or the other too much politically. Like, I have my own personal beliefs, but I talk with people I maybe disagree with, like conservatives a lot of the time, because it's fun to be able to understand where they're coming from, the puzzle of like, okay, I understand where I'm coming from. Like, after I get where you're coming from and I'm coming from, seeing how far the gap is, because I've found that at least when I'm able to like exert pressure on a conversation, everybody's able to agree. It's just a lot of these streamers and political people or debate people seem to have it tends to lead to argument. It tends to breed conflict. And if you're going in with the intention of like getting them an understanding or best way to go. So some of like the recurring advice that I give is based around how to take somebody who's when you're an expert and explain things to them. So like, for instance, you would be an expert on your side of the political aisle and all the reforms and things that your side is. But when you're talking to someone, especially someone that disagrees with you, they're essentially a novice to all of those ideas and that thought process. And treating the relationship as such is really, really helpful. And likewise, reversing it, have a very good understanding of everything that's going on. But there's always going to be a divide between these two groups of people. So when you understand all this stuff, it's really hard to put yourself back in the perspective of somebody that didn't, of somebody watching their very first video introducing, these like that. And from that point all the way over to where you are, really difficult, especially when you don't know where they're starting from. So at this point I'm rambling, but basically I help people talk to each other. I think that's probably what I'll be.
No, but you brought up a really good point, because like in my life, I'm 30 years old. I've been a socialist. I've been a libertarian. I've been like, and it's funny because when I watch certain content, I remember what it used to feel like when I agreed with that content. But I don't agree with it anymore, and it's hard to conceptualize how somebody may be feeling about what you're saying, because you're on a different path, I guess, or I don't know, like on a different, I don't want to say like mental level up or down, but you're like maybe horizontally
breaking up like a lot. You're breaking up like a lot.
I'm breaking up a lot. Okay, maybe my mic might be a little too loud. Okay, let's see.
Cutting like in and out. I'm not sure how to fix that.
Yeah, let me see. We're on Discord, right? Let me look.
Let's not do whereby. Let's not do whereby, because I think that's gonna kill the internet. Whereby.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be hella problematic. Just because I'm streaming now too, so this is all gonna be whatever. All right, so
okay, that's fine.
So let's go through what you got.
Yeah. So I was just okay. So one thing I want to talk about is, so I hear a lot at the protest. So during what happened at the protest, and just interrupt me if my mic is cutting out.
Sure.
What happens at the protest, there'll be a large march. The group will then find a specific location, an intersection, or like some historical place in New York, and take a knee. And at that moment, a protester, one of the leaders, will come up and give a speech. And he'll talk about, some of the demands and some of the ideas that the group is about. He'll give meaning to what they're doing. And one of those ideas is disbanding the entire New York police department. And this is also consistent with what's going on in Minneapolis, which is where the George Floyd thing happened, where I think Minneapolis actually said that, yes, they are going to begin the process of disbanding the police. So that entire group of people that I support has this particular belief, but I want to be able to communicate with them that I really, really don't think that's a good idea, without also, without creating dissonance. And one of the reasons why I think it's a bad idea is because not all cops are bad. There is a, and then you have the ACAB types, right? Which I disagree with. And you have this, and there's just general common sense understanding that, yes, police do good things. There is police brutality. There are a lot of problems with the police force, but disbanding them completely, I don't think is the right idea. And I'm afraid like making that point is going to just get me labeled a certain way to my audience and whoever audience I'm talking with. That's just one of the things I want to talk about.
Yeah. That, starting on that one, I've seen this a lot too. So if I could reword this, basically Sure. What's going on is you want to reach out and communicate to a group of people that are more so in favor of this idea of abolishing the police or defunding, or like getting rid of that organization completely and replacing it with something else. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And from your perspective, you look at that and you're like, okay, I know where you're coming from on that, but I think that I want to go the direction of reforms and things like that. And so it can be difficult to communicate with those people when they are at a more extreme end of solutions for this problem, and you're wanting to more so build on an existing system, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Um, I think that there's two kind of separate hurdles you have here. So one would be to get them out of the mindset of defunding and abolishing them, which is going to be difficult. And then a simpler hurdle would be to get them on board with some lighter reform ideas that you have. I think these two things can be done separately. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say focusing on the second one would be a lot easier. So for instance, we were talking last night with Brento Box, the Battle Lounge, and Vivian and Mindwaves and a few other people. And when we talked about some actual reforms, I was like, oh, what kind of stuff is being tossed around? What do you guys think? We had some interesting input from members of the military who remember Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the changes in the way the military worked after that was changed. And basically it comes down to holding the police accountable, and a lot of the reforms were around that: holding police accountable, creating extra agencies to deal with prosecuting the police, pretty common sense things that I think most people would agree with. And it seemed like most people in the chat were on board with it, perhaps even Vivian, who was more so of the mindset that we should abolish and we should defund, and she doesn't want to see any of the people that are in the current institution back again, or she's worried that this is going to happen again. But I think if you're able to get her on board with these lighter reforms, if you can do that, you can do that separately from then changing her whole mind on the other thing. And I think this applies with a lot of the leftists, or a lot of the people that are pushing more for the socialist outcome and whatever. I think diffusing that's going to be very difficult. And they're coming from a place in their heart about it. This is going to be the best thing. So if I'm going to talk about a solution, I want to talk about the best thing. And that's fine, as long as you can get them to agree on reforms that are closer to where everybody else is at. I think you can accomplish your goal just by doing that, just by getting them on board with the reforms you're talking about. But if you want to diffuse the more extreme ideas, that's way harder, I feel like.
True. And this is something I was thinking about, which may be a little deceptive, so I wanted to run it by you. But really what the idea of disbanding the police comes down to is essentially privatizing the police force. In my view, I could be wrong about that, but taking it out of the hands of the government is essentially putting it into private hands, which typically... Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if that's everybody. I don't know if everybody's asking. So this is the problem, is the main thing that they want to do is get rid of the police. So
right.
I think the common thread among everybody there is first get rid of the police, and that's their main thing. As far as what replaces that, there may be private options like you're talking about. I haven't heard that, at least talking to Vivian and, lurking in some other streams. It seems like the idea is that you're going to create individual government agencies, sort of like what we have for child protective services and things like that, that will handle very specific instances of breaking the law or very specific issues in the community. And the idea is that the members of these different forces that are in charge of these different things would be members of the community. They would have their own thing, whatever. I don't know how they're going to design all that, and I'm not necessarily super interested in that, just because I don't think we get step one done, which is get rid of the police. But I feel like that's worth mentioning. I haven't heard anything about privatizing. I've heard that they want to create other individual agencies which are catered to these specific problems that may require specialists.
Okay, so they're still they want to get rid of the police, but still keep it within the hands of the government, just separate agencies that will be able to take over these kinds of issues.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, because it for a little while it just seemed odd that they were going in a libertarian direction, but I also don't want to be so you're a libertarian now, huh? Because then that's when you start getting into that weird kind of argumentative stuff. So that's good. That's good information about that. Okay, so let me just think about. So what I need to do in that regard is I need to do some research and make sure I have solid ideas for what good reforms can be. And I do have some like professional knowledge of like laws and stuff like that, so I might be able to do that. I'm just anticipating the objection of, well, we did that already and it didn't work, and I don't think there's a way to get over that. I think that's when we get into like what you were saying before, the first hurdle, which is more difficult to overcome.
Yeah. So do you think that most of these people will be prepared with instances of these programs not working?
Probably not.
Because I think that's where the conversation would end, right? Like if they were overly critical of your system and they said that, but we've tried this and it doesn't work, but they have no examples of trying these specific reforms and them not working, I think they couldn't go down the direction of like actually proving it with any evidence. So that kind of leaves them to just argue in the abstract about it. And I think in the abstract, I'm not sure if they would necessarily win out over like common sense reform.
True. And what I need to do is I need to find instances where reform has worked. Which
yeah, you could. Yeah, that'd be a good way.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm prepared for this argument. I think that's a good one. So, another topic that I've been struggling with is the apparent inconsistency between appreciating the COVID outbreak and protesting at the same time. I don't know if you've discussed that with those guys at all.
Yeah. And would this be an issue more so with conservative folks than liberal folks?
I think the problem is that it's not an issue with liberal folks.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Because just like from my perspective, the landscape is that it seems to be, the right wants to open up and the left wants to stay shut down longer because they're more worried, and Trump is like, oh, it's going to be over. Like Trump has been on the side of it's not that big of a deal, and liberals have been on the side of we have to take it super seriously. And then at the same time, we're having these massive protests, which I will say, as somebody who's attended many of them, everyone's wearing a mask. There's people doing hand sanitizer and stuff like that, but it still doesn't seem like enough to. It still doesn't seem like they're doing. It still seems like a major risk for spreading COVID.
Yeah, I think undoubtedly it's a risk. And so personally, I would just concede it immediately. But that's because I think that entering into an argument on that kind of takes away from where I feel like you're more interested, which is in talking real reform and maybe getting them on board with some ideas that people on the right and left side of things could agree with. And so if they want to come at you about because you want to make clear to them, right, that this is an issue. I really, why would it be too big of a deal to make that a thing? Like, why is it so important to highlight the COVID issue with the protests?
It's a big deal. It's mainly, I find it coming from my audience a lot is like, how can you justify doing these protests for so long and with so many people and at the same time not take COVID seriously? Did I answer your question correctly?
Well, I'm trying to understand the significance of it insofar as communicating with these people and getting your ideas across as far as reform.
Oh, as far as reform, this is a different issue, a different argument.
Okay. So are there honestly some people that don't see the protests as a COVID risk? Have you encountered that before?
It just seems like to me, and again, I could be wrong, this is why I'm talking to you about it, but it seems to me there is a contradiction on the left between taking COVID seriously while at the same time having these protests. And I'm not saying like don't have the protests because of COVID, but there is a contradiction in my mind, and I don't really know how to resolve it.
Okay. Well, I think that that's a risk that those people are taking. I mean, this gets into difficult territory because I'm
Yeah,
not
it's difficult.
necessarily sure. Um, just because for a lot of left people, at least insofar as my observations, when you start talking about the COVID risks associated with the protests, same with talking or focusing on the victims of the rioting and of the looting, it almost feels like it takes away from the general message and the media boost of the protest. And so I think some left people will have a knee-jerk reaction that like, wait, why are you talking about that? That's not related to this and yada yada. Or they
Exactly.
feel like maybe you're not on the team and you're trying to distract from the main thing, and that's tough. I've noticed a lot of that. As far as tackling that, I would say that like obviously if you want to avoid that kind of flack, not focusing on it is probably for the best. I'm just trying to figure out what you accomplish in convincing them that there is a COVID threat. Just because I think in their heart of hearts they understand that there's a COVID risk associated with this, but they've made the decision that these protests happening now with the kind of spark that they've been given and the worldwide whatever of it, that the COVID risk is something that they've accepted or they're okay with setting aside while the protests go on, or they factored that into this weighing out of the risks versus the benefits of the protests, and they feel that now is the time for the protests, even in spite of the COVID stuff.
Yeah, ultimately that's the argument that they have to make. And I feel like it's going to be interesting to hear people on the left start making like arguments that somebody on the right would make, which are like, oh, you know, maybe COVID isn't as contagious as we thought it was. Maybe it wasn't as big of a deal as we thought it was. You know, these kind of rationalizations. But yeah, you're totally right. I want to be able to bring this up in a conversation while not seeming like I'm against them. You know?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, in order to do that, I want to make arguments because I you know, personally, I do feel it was a little overblown, the COVID thing. You know, personally, I do feel that way. I think, like, you know, some of the recorded deaths, you know, like, I don't know if you saw the video, but, like, a health official was saying that if somebody dies from a heart attack and we think that they have COVID at the same time, we're going to consider it a COVID death. So then at the same time, I want to be able to say things like that, which come off as conservative, but maybe because we want to downplay the COVID thing in order to support the protesters, that might be a more acceptable argument to make.
So these are points that I view as existing in a vacuum. So like they don't necessarily need to be made, and I think that they already exist out there and other people are talking about them. So I just feel like if you're talking to these people about the protests, so you know they're on the left, rhetoric wise, I would make the choice not to go on to those issues just because I would gain no ground by doing so. Like when I look at that, I look at it as like I'm going to assume that this other person is reasonable and they understand that there's a risk associated with this. Or I'm going to assume that this person really cared about the COVID thing. They could look into how the deaths are being tallied and they could entertain that argument if they really want to. But insofar as having a discussion with that person, I would see that like our conversation wouldn't gain anything from discussing those things. So I'm having a hard time imagining a situation where you're put in this position actually have to argue those points rather than moving past them in favor of something more productive.
Okay, yeah, I think you're right about that because outside of like the right-leaning people in my audience, I don't really hear talk on mainstream media or Twitter or anything like that about COVID and the protests.
Yeah.
You know, so like the two things don't really seem associated unless I were to bring them up, and then I would be kind of getting myself into like a tangled web where like I'm pretty much going to like force myself into making arguments I don't really want to make. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And the other thing, and this may be like a hyperbolic comparison, but if we look at something like the, I think this is similar to like the 3150 thing, where like you have this thing that exists in a vacuum, this point that you can make. The problem is that that point is so often associated with this very, very negative outlook and this very negative rhetoric that to say the point that exists in the vacuum, like needlessly brings about the idea of the other thing. So if you're talking about the way that debts are reported, all these things, like you said, these are so often associated with arguments around perhaps the hypocrisy of the left or distrust of these health agencies and things like that, because that argument or that talking point is so closely entwined and associated with the other thing, bringing it up is always going to bring that other thing. And so you're always going to have an uphill battle of like separating the two. And so if I have to spend all that energy and that conversational time separating those two ideas, I have to look at the first thing I wanted to say and I have to go, okay, is there a lot of benefit to saying this thing? How does this help me in the larger conversation? And if it doesn't outweigh the difficulty of separating it from this other bad ideology, then perhaps I shouldn't use it, because there are other things that other directions you could go with it.
Well said. Well said. And I think the only reason in my heart, I guess, why I would want to bring it up, because I would want to be critical of the left in that regard, but I'm critical of the left and the right, and so I think it's like I don't know if I want to say ego thing, to kind of like rub it in their face that they're like allowing this kind of contradiction to happen, but I guess
the hypocrisy thing.
Yeah, the hypocrisy, like that's the hypocrisy thing is something I want to point out. But I guess I have to pick my battles as far as, do I really want to have, is it really that important to me? Like, then yeah. I have to check my own values, like, because my own values are, I would rather have the protest go on, so that it might not even be worth, like, picking that fight if the ultimate conclusion would be to, like, I would have to make the argument that, okay, the protest shouldn't be going on this long because of COVID, even though that's something that I don't believe, just for the sake of shaming liberals.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, too, that when you take this a few steps farther down the line of argumentation between the left and the right over this like line of dialogue, it often comes down to like, not only do they want to point out the hypocrisy on the left, but they want to point out hypocrisy insofar as it relates to how people were treating the rights protests that were going on about the stay-at-home orders. And so I think that's immediately down the line of questioning. And because that's not really your purpose, I assume that you don't want to point out that like, well, you guys weren't okay with protesting when these people did it, because then you go into like, yes, but these protests are very, very different. They're about very different things. And like this other group obviously didn't wear the masks and everything else because their whole point was that this wasn't as big a deal. And you get into a whole other discussion that's so far removed from the police thing that, yeah, I think avoiding going down there is probably for the best. Right.
Yeah, you're getting into a whole nother tangle. Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, that helps. Okay, so separate topic that I want to bring up is the violent protest, the violent aspect of the protest. So the first few days that I went out, the first few days I went out, the protests were 90% peaceful. And then we, on stream, all of us saw it all together. As night came and as the march got smaller and smaller, violent protesters were like using the march as cover and looting places and like getting into fights and stuff like that. For the most part, the protesters were trying to stop the violence. So that's something I really appreciated. But something I hear particularly from the left, and we're going to talk about some conservative things that I want to argue against as well. It's not all about the left, but one thing I'm hearing from some people on the left is that, okay, this political violence is justified. Like, we shouldn't condemn them Like, this is a natural thing that happens when you have an unjust system. But meanwhile, the protest itself doesn't even agree with that. The protesters don't want the violence. It's not like the protesters are like turning the other cheek when these the violence is happening. They're literally creating human walls and putting themselves at risk to prevent that kind of violence from happening. So this might be another instance where I kind of want to point out the hypocrisy of the left, but I'm just I'm just curious what your thoughts are about this issue.
So again, with this hypocrisy thing, if somebody honestly doesn't want to denounce the rioters and stuff, I think they're in an extreme position. Same as the people that are honestly down with getting rid of all the police. Same with the people that don't think that the COVID thing is actually a risk. Like, I think these are more so extreme positions, and so avoiding the need to discuss the extreme positions is probably for the best. So again, this would be something where weighing out what you gain from pointing that out versus like how much you derail the conversation bringing it up is perhaps worth considering.
Right. I just realized what I'm doing is I'm taking an extreme position and I'm extrapolating it onto the left entirely, which is which is unfair.
Expect them to denounce it. I think a lot of people want what they're expecting when they do things like that is they want the moderates to denounce it. And it's like a purity check, or like what you're saying. It's kind of like I have a sense that this is some kind of fairness. That like, well, I would like to criticize the extreme part of the right and say the same thing. So I want to criticize the extreme part of left and present those things. I just think that like bringing up the extreme ideas to any extent is not super helpful. Like I tend not to do it. And when people want to pull the conversation there, I always try to just ground it back and be like, okay. Like, I don't know about that stuff. Like, I'm iffy on it, but would you agree that this reform would be reasonable? Like, I just try to always bring it back. Just, because, like, I'm not interested in diffusing those ideas, and maybe that's, like, a different outlook than I think a lot of politics people, because you feel the need to. Like, if you have even the slightest inkling of a belief that that person is hanging on to that idea, you want to diffuse that, and you feel almost responsible that when you're talking to them that you want to make sure that they're aware of that. Like, yeah, you're not like green lighting the rioters, right? Like, you understand that the rioters, like, it's not a good thing, right? But the problem is they at the same time want to give nuance as well. They want to be like, well, I don't want you to extrapolate this so far as to say that like I am completely against them and dehumanize them and don't understand why they're doing it and yada yada. That's what they're hearing, and that's what they think they sign up for if they accept that. So they feel the need to be like, well, you know, if these people are in a situation where the government takes this away, like, you know, in political philosophy, whatever, we can easily justify this as as an act of like political violence. Or other people want to go, well, when you push people down and you put them in these circumstances, this is what's going to happen. And what we're seeing is a result of like socioeconomic differences and long-standing issues rather than like, you know, these rioters reflecting the protesters or their beliefs or yada yada. And in any case, adding that nuance then encourages you to be like, yes, 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 but you do understand that, like, that because you want to have a conversation that the conservatives can look at and go, okay, yeah, he got him. Yeah, they know that that's bad. And it's just so rough because it's a tough game to play. And if anybody gets emotional or upset or they mischaracterize or misunderstand where you're coming from, or vice versa, you misunderstand or mischaracterize where they're coming from, all of a sudden, because we wanted to add this nuance, we've become lost in the grander scheme of the conversation. And I think that happens like all the time, and it really sucks.
Wow. Okay. Really well said. Really well said. So, okay. And what I've noticed about myself when you were speaking is, yeah, I do feel the need to diffuse the extreme ideas. I do feel that desire. And it's a lot easier to do it on the right because I'm like center left in general. So like, okay, so I have people on the right in my chat saying like, you know, like, these people are disgusting and like these people should just get jobs and go home. And I feel very comfortable making arguments against those people because I just feel like, you know, they're on the right, which is like not really. I'm getting lost in my own thoughts, but because it's not true what I was going to say, because I do want to be able to reach out to the right, and I do want to be able to not have conflicts with the right either. So when they say things like, "Oh, these people should just get jobs," you know, like obviously I want to make the argument that these people have been disenfranchised, like arguments from the left that, like you were saying, and there's so much anger and there's so much like trauma from being black in America that these people have to express themselves, and you have to respect that. And it's like, it's part of what it means to be an American, to protest. And okay, so here's okay, this is making sense to me now. So like, I feel the need to diffuse the extreme ideas on the left, because I think we can come to some agreement with people on the right and people on the left. Like, I think if we all agreed that, hey, protests are fundamental to American values, you have to let the people protest. And then the right will say, what about the looting and the violence? Then we have to say, hey, nobody supports the looting and the violence except maybe people on the extreme left, which isn't the protesters. The protesters aren't, as a whole, they are not these kind of anarchist types, which, you know, it's interesting if on my videos, when you see those anarchist types, the group will usually get them out, like before they even start violence. There's a very interesting scene where somebody came in with a black umbrella, and you know, they were dressed in all black and that whole look, and the group immediately took the umbrella and forced him to leave. So it's so I think by trimming some of the extreme ideas on the left, we can have a meeting of the minds between the right and the left. So that's why I want to kind of pick some of these fights, because ultimately I think there's a worthwhile goal at the end of it. So like, because I think what you were like, you're actually a really good speaker, and you're talking about some like really complicated ideas. So I think I'm just not following everything. So just correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you said. Yeah. You're kind of saying that attacking these extreme ideas just isn't really a worthwhile pursuit in some cases, and you're better off focusing on the real practical reforms that we can make.
If that's the point of your conversation, though, to add something to that, I do see value in de-radicalizing, and I just think that making it apparent to the other party of the conversation when you're shifting gears into that topic would be helpful. So for instance, like, okay, I'm going to start talking about reforms, yada yada, we talk about reforms, then at the end of it, like, and separately, could I pick your brain on some of these other takes that I kind of disagree with or don't see where you're coming from on? And they go, okay, sure. Put them in a position where they're able to explain to you where they're coming from, and then handle those case by case. So hear them out on the feelings and the underlying principles that kind of are driving them to those more extreme positions, and then find them more reasonable alternatives or channels for that energy. So if they're like, no, I'm down with the protesters and the rioters, and you know what, I think the protesters should support the rioters, and you know why? Because these people have been pushed under for too long, and if the government isn't going to hear their voice, then they'll hear the voice of violence. And you know what, this country has been built on the back of violent revolts and things like that, and they learn from white people how to do this, and like all those talking points that you hear, try to get past that and get to the bottom where they're coming from. So in that case, there's a frustration that these voices haven't been heard. And so I think one thing that you can do is direct them to active change that's happening and be like, yeah, and look, they got these officers in trouble. And I really think that if we focus on like documenting and making public and holding these officials accountable, that's really where we get the change. And I think if we hold their feet to the fire, that's what I want to get out of this, because I agree with you that these voices have been stifled for too long, and that on this issue in particular, they've been treated poorly since the inception of the police. So maybe that's where you're coming from on wanting to get rid of the police entirely. But at this point, that institution has become so ingrained in American life and in the lives of, you know, people around the globe that also have police forces, that I think that for now, reforming that and making that better reflect the values that you think that police should hold might be for the best. Or to tell them that, like, as far as the rioters and the looting, I think you can empathize with those people. I think you can understand where they're coming from and how their situation led them to do that. But I think at the same time, voicing your active support for acts of violence is going to lose you a lot of people. A lot of people are going to stop listening to you when you do that. And I think a much easier way of, or a better position to put them into, is where they can at the same time empathize with the rioters and understand why that's happening, but denounce acts of violence because they're counterproductive to the reforms and the grander optics that we're looking for to make reform happen.
Beautifully said, man. Well said.
Thanks.
Like, you really wrapped it up very, very nicely. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like, in order to do the most good, in a sense, we have to separate ourselves from certain things and embrace real practical change that you know is actually possible. Because if we keep spending so much time, and if we're taking the narrative of the movement to be something that's not necessarily achievable, ultimately we're going to look silly in the long run, or like leave people demotivated and feeling like they lost, when really if we like channel that energy into practical reforms that have been proven to work, for example, hypothetically,
yes,
then we can do a lot more good overall.
Yeah, and then selling that to them. And I don't mean this to be condescending, but this is just like an analogy that pops into my head.
Sure.
Is like if a baby's crying and it's sucking on its thumb, and you know that's bad for it and whatever, it's almost like replacing the thumb with a pacifier. You're just trying to give them something else that's going to have the same function but might be a little bit better, you know, in the grander scheme of things for everybody. So that's not going to go away, that being upset. And I don't think it's our place to diffuse that, because that anger is what's pushing these people to do these protests and to actually make change. So I don't think getting rid of that is the main goal, but yeah, giving them something else that they could channel that, giving them another way where they can feel like what they're doing is being exerted into the real world is a real thing. So showing them like, here, look, this is an actual accomplishment that we've done and we can continue to do. I love your passion. I just wish you would put it towards these things, because we can realize these things. And they're so within grasp that, like, if you're already reaching this far, it's going to be so easy for you to reach just an inch in front of your face and grab the thing that we can actually get now. And that's going to build us momentum that's going to lead to these larger things. So if honest to God, what you want are the larger reforms, are the larger scale changes of everything, then I think we're going to need momentum to get there. And you're going to stifle that momentum if you try to make it happen too quickly, or if you abandon optics in favor of like principles that you're feeling deeper down, or you're extrapolating further out that everybody can't connect with. So just making this inch by inch progress as we make our way down the hill is going to be for the best. And we just want to keep this ball rolling. And here's some actual things we could do to prove to the community and everybody else that we're here to be productive, and we're here to actually get reforms in place that are going to make the lives of these people better. Because there's also the separate kind of criticism that comes at some of the more extreme left people, and it's that they're abandoning and this is an extreme or a more extreme position, that they're abandoning the African American people that they want to help, because they're pushing these crazier things and they're ruining the whole movement in the process. And I think that that's like, in a lot of ways, very valid. I see where that's coming from, and I would agree that to an extent presenting the more extreme positions and going after them kind of on your own, separate from what these protesters want, or perhaps what like most African American people want, which is real reform and actual change, it almost feels like you betray those communities by doing that. And so that's like a whole separate issue. But yeah, just generally giving them something better and showing them that like we're making accomplishments here. And the reality is we just want to keep making progress. And that the more often we do that, the grander the momentum of the whole thing is going to be. And that's going to get us closer to the more extreme thing that you want.
Fantastic. That really, really helps. Because now I have a direction. Because I had these arguments in my head and they were kind of vague and I felt like they were contradictory to what my values were, but you like took all the parts and you put it into a very fine argument. That's really, really huge, and I'm going to definitely bring this into the next debates that I have or discussions that I have in the future.
Cool.
Okay, so I for now I think this I feel like I have a strong foundation for this particular thing. There's one other topic that I want to talk to you about. Do you still have time? Am I keeping you too long?
No, you're good. We can go long.
Okay. So as I've gotten a little bit of internet fame, small amount, I've also gotten quite a bit of criticism and that type of thing. So I'm just curious, as I just want to hear your thoughts on some of the things I've been experiencing, and maybe you can help me deal with them, because. So one of the main ones is I am recording the events and stuff like that, and people donate to the stream while I'm live streaming, and there's a pocket of my community who thinks that it's wrong for me to be getting donations, and like they're saying like I'm profiting off the movement, and like, oh, it's like just another. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, did I lose you for a second?
Nope.
Okay. That I'm like, just another white guy profiting off of the movement and stuff like that. And like, that's not how I feel in my heart, but I don't want that to become part of my image or part of my platform in the future. And maybe because I plan on covering protests for a while, like it's something I really like to do. I have gear for it. So I'm just curious, is this like something that it just comes along with being on the internet, or do you think there's something I can do to prevent those people from feeling that way?
I think where they're coming from, I can see validity in it, right? Like, you can imagine being the perspective of somebody who maybe wishes they could go there and do these things and whatever, and seeing this guy live stream it while also making money. I think a lot of people can instantly go to that's not good, right? Yeah. I think that's going to happen no matter what. So this again becomes a question of like, what do you hope to gain out of it? And then we have to like measure out like value wise, what are we costing to address it and things like that. Like, if you're making money from donations during this, I think, and you do believe that there is some validity to where these people are coming from, looking at how much you make in donations and then comparing it to the amount of flack you get. Like, if you're only making like $16 or $20 or something in donations, maybe you decide that like, I'd rather not take the flack, and I'll stomach the loss of $15 or $20, whatever.
True.
And another thing that other people did, if low key in the background, it's like, but I want people to be in the habit of feeling okay with donating or using that feature or whatever the case is for wanting to keep it on, even if you're not making a lot from it. You could also do what a lot of people are doing, where you're going to put that towards a charity or something else and keep the function up there. That way people still engage with it. They'll know they could donate to you, but at the same time, you'll be able to quell the anger of the people that would feel bad if you were making money off of it, because you could just be like, well, I'm giving this away at the end of the day. If people still want to donate, they can. I appreciate seeing the support and whatever, but the money's not going to me, so if you guys want to freak out over it, it's not going to me. So I think that diffuses it too. So either way, if you want to turn it off, that's probably one way. If you wanted to reroute all that to a charity, that's one way. If you wanted to keep it, I guess like you would have to weigh out the cost benefit of that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the more I keep, the more fuel it's going to give to that particular idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, because the way I feel about it is, like, I'm spending hours out, because I want to keep it. Like that's like, it feels weird to say, but and and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can convince me out of it. And I'm not opposed to taking a percentage and donating it. That's not something I have a problem with. But like, I think it's because I do run a business. Like, my day job is running my own business. I feel like my time has a certain value associated with it. And, I'm spending my time out there. I'm taking, like, risks, potentially getting arrested, potentially getting hurt and stuff like that. So that money is, like, is a legitimate form of compensation for the work that I'm doing. But I feel like that argument is never going to fly.
Well, for those people, it won't fly because the whole idea is they think you should be doing this out of kindness and support for the movement and not viewing it as, I want to get paid to cover the protests.
True. So yeah, I think somebody has reached out to me from the Black Lives Matter movement, and they want to work together on some kind of thing like that, and I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. I'm not going to give 100% away, but I'm going to find some kind of percentage that makes it work, because ultimately it is a cause that I believe in, and it's not my main source of income either. Like you were, like, kind of how you were saying, like, before, like, is it enough money that you're willing to part with and that type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, is it worth all the trouble? I guess is how I would look at it. Like, for me, I know that, like, my stream's small, my donation, like, it's worth knowing I got 2 big donations from other talks. But I mean, like, if I was covering the protests, I would look at it as, like, there is no way that this ever makes sense. Like, even if I was making, like, $500 to $1,000 a stream, I still don't think that would, like, compensate me enough to be comfortable with, like, accepting donations while covering the protests, just because I do feel like the flack would be generally deserved, and I would personally, like, see where they're coming from. You're never convincing them out of it. And there's no way I personally could justify it, so I would just avoid it. But yeah.
So to give you some more information, we had a guy donate like $2,500 in one stream.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's when I think that idea started really coming up, where it's like, what are you doing with all this money? You're just going to keep all this money, like, that kind of thing. So, sure. Yeah, I have to, because it does wear on my conscience as well. So I think for my own conscience as well as the optics of it, I will commit to donating a portion of that money to a good cause, and whatever donations I get in the future.
Yeah, that's cool. And you could always do a follow-up stream when you're at your house or something, and then turn your donations back on when you're at home. I mean, that's always, like, a possibility.
True. Oh yeah, so right, like, the donations I get when I'm not streaming a protest, that's fair game.
Yeah, I feel like it would be difficult for them to argue against that. A lot more so than, like, boots on the ground and making all that. Because it almost feels like you're there for the entertainment value of the thing, and that being the attractor of donations. Even if that's not the case, it's very easy to see it that way.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, cool, like Jake Pauling it sort of deal.
Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know... what my future is with this type of thing, but I'm just trying to be forward thinking and not nip this in the bud and do the right thing early, as opposed to waiting until it's too late. And okay, so one other question I have, I think I have 2 more questions, but I'm just curious what you think of my channel name.
Actual intelligence?
Yeah. Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that?
Condescension.
Right. Okay. So this is a problem as well. Because when I made it, my thought was, I'm going out in the field and getting actual intel, like how the CIA would say intelligence, like an intelligence agency. Like, I was like, I'm getting actual intel. I'm on the ground, I'm recording this stuff. That's the name. But like I saw when I went on Destiny stream, like there was like hundreds of comments like with that like doofus meme, like actual intelligence, durr. It's like, oh boy, this is not good.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I should change it before I get more followers. I feel like I kind of got a lot of followers already. I have like 700 on Twitch and like 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. Do you think it's too late to change it, or do you think I should just stick with it? What do you think?
I feel like that's like a business decision. That would be real tough because you would have to weigh it out, or at least that's how I would handle it. Because the only other thing I could think of that would be less like intrusive to your brand would just be to like rebrand stuff as like kind of like spy themed, so that they pick up on that. But I think it would be really, really tough. Yeah, I don't know. That's a very tough problem.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. It is a business thing. It's a bit of a shot in the dark to ask you, but I like the idea of changing it to a spy thing. Like, maybe if I change my logo to like a guy with a hat and the magnifying glass, that would be more consistent, and it would maybe lead people to the meaning that I intended.
Or a briefcase with AI on it or something. I don't know. Yeah, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's a good one too.
Like, I like the abbreviation. I like that you get AI. I feel like that's a cool abbreviation.
Yeah. Somebody suggested that I change it to actual intel.
That would be a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good middle ground, because it's not changing it too dramatically where people are going to be like, oh, what channel is this? But it also is getting rid of that pretentious vibe.
Yeah. It communicates what you were trying to do from the beginning way clearer. Like, actual intel feels like, okay, like the FBI talking about intel. Okay, I get that.
Okay. I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let me think. I thought I had one more thing for you, but I can't think of it right now.
No problem.
Well, I can't think of it, so I think we can just move on, but
sure.
Yeah, and I'll send you a message on Discord or something if it comes up. But dude, you really, really helped. You really, really helped. It's something that I was feeling a little anxious about, and now I feel much more confident going forward with this kind of stuff. Yeah. Let me just look at my notes to make sure.
Basically, like, taking a step back at any point where you feel frustrated or stuck or like whatever, and just being like, compared to my goal, does this help go in that direction, or is this going to take us down a path that like strays further from it? And just like reframing it as that every so often might help.
Yeah, I think I need to spend some time getting clear in my own mind what exactly are my goals. So that's pretty important.
Yeah, because it seems like there's two of them, that you want to be able to be the voice for the reform that you think is actually going to get passed and is actually going to happen, while at the same time de-radicalizing. And I just feel like they're very different conversations, so just keeping in mind which one you want to do might be helpful. If you want to do both of them in the same conversation, just making it clear to the other person when you're shifting gears into talking about the other thing, because you're going to approach it very differently. A conversation to de-radicalize somebody has to be a lot about listening, and it has to be a lot about giving them an alternative. Whereas with the reform stuff, a lot of that is selling them on existing ideas and presenting like factual arguments as to why this is the thing that we should put our efforts behind, and then selling it to them enough that like when they're with their stream on their own, they might present these as some like reforms that they've heard that they personally agree with, or has a vibe that they think is whatever, selling it to them and then having them sell it to other people, essentially.
Right. Dude, like, yes. Like, I feel the energy. I feel the congruency in my mind. Dude, you're really skilled. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate this.
Not a problem.
Yeah, no, that was, like, I've been trying to figure this out for, like, the last 2 weeks, and you just crushed it.
Who's Becca?
That's now you're getting into meme territory. So the chat. So I ride my bike while I cover the protests, and there's all kinds of memes that have come up. And so sometimes what will happen is one protest will end, and I talk with my chat to find out where the next protest is, so I can go there and film it. So one time I was moving from one protest to another, and I just asked this girl on a bike how do I get to Central Park from Union Square? And she's like, just follow me, like I'll take you all the way there. So we were like riding and we were talking, and now the chat has this fantasy that we're gonna get married and she's my new girlfriend and all this kind of stuff. Some of them even like added her on Instagram because they heard her say her Instagram on chat. So I'm a little worried that she's gonna see the stream and see everything that chat has been saying and get a restraining order on me. But we're gonna see what happens.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
That's gonna be the diffusing radicalism.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main issue with my chat is getting too involved in my personal life. But yeah, just on another note, dude, like if you ever just like want to get on a stream and you just want to talk and bullshit and like share followers and share our audience and stuff like that, let's do it, dude. You're a cool dude. I enjoy talking to you, and I don't know what your goals are on Twitch, but I want to try and keep progressing forward.
I want to be someone that people go to at questions like this, and I want to feel comfortable discussing these things with me, because I don't think that there's a lot of that. I don't think there's a lot of people that you could reach out to for this advice that wouldn't come with strings attached to it, whether that's like I don't know. I don't want to get into what the strings would be, but do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, it's like you kind of it's like a Dr. K kind of situation. Sorta,
yeah. But for like how to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think you're like a more I don't want to say more practical than Dr. K, but like specific, instead of mental health, you're like argument formulation and logical thinking and communication. Like you're go ahead.
Personal and interpersonal kind of.
Right. Yeah, like I totally agree. So yeah, maybe you don't want to like get into like loose political discussions because you don't want that to make people feel like they can't talk to you like the way we're talking now.
Yeah, and I still get involved with them just enough to, because watching is very different than being able to ask questions and stuff, as far as getting a feel for like the character and beliefs of other people. So I'll still do those talks and go on, chill out sessions with other people. Like Mindwaves has a really cool one. If you ever stop by Mindwaves, I mean, I'm on there anytime I see that people are shooting the shit, just because it's fun to pick their brain, and I feel like that's one of those safer conversational spaces, even though sometimes they do get into arguments and they definitely discuss like political issues. I feel like the vibe is very different from something like a formal panel show or like a formal debate. And
right.
just being that person where like if you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna get past this with this person, or man, it's so frustrating, this happens all the time, or man, this community said all this stuff about me and I don't know where that's even coming from, like stuff like that. I think I could do that. Yeah, and being that for people might be good. In the future, if there's drama between people or people are upset, I think that might be another like option as far as mediating conversations or something like that when I get better at it. But for now, just talking to people and giving my take and keeping everybody grounded and stuff, I think that's worthwhile.
But yeah, like, dude, like your conversation with Destiny when he was like really opening up and like that was amazing. That was really powerful stuff. And I'm interested to see like what your follow-up is going to be to that, because you were saying like, oh, like I didn't realize this. Let me think about this, and we'll talk. When he was talking about like some of like the actual trauma he's been experiencing. And dude, I that's why I reached out to you, because I think the work you're doing is extremely necessary. Because in my personal opinion, the inability to talk about political ideas is one of the major problems that we're going through right now, and you kind of like see it on Twitch. It's like,
yeah,
it feels weird for me to say this, but like, just imagine if Destiny and Hassan could just like have real calm debates. You know what I mean? Without like, yeah. I think both of those guys together, or like whoever, can be so productive together. But there's just I don't want to end up in that spot where like drama is overtaking my ability to like think rationally and have. I'm not saying either of them are irrational, but just their inability to have the discussion is the problem, and I just don't want to end up there. That's why I'm glad I was able to talk to you, because I did reach out to Mindwaves. There's another guy that I'm going to talk to, and I don't want to my first impression with them to be like, oh, okay, this guy's a conservative, or okay, this guy's like a Biden shill, or he's not left enough, or any of this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think you prepared me very well to start entering this arena step by step, in a way that I think is very practical.
Yeah, and looking at burnt bridges as like a losing condition is also helpful. I think some people go into conversations and they don't value that nearly as much as like I know that I personally do. So like when I'm talking with Destiny, if he says something that upsets me or that I disagree with, I don't want to snap at him, because for me, a lose condition of the entire conversation is for it to get into a giant shouting match, or is for a bridge to be burned, or is for him to think super duper poorly of me because I made myself out to be a fool or something like that.
Exactly.
But I think for other people, they are okay with that if you ask them, but if they really think about it, they're not. Where they think they're okay with burning bridges and stuff in favor of their principles or this or that, but the reality is that should be a lose condition for a lot of people, and they should view conversations as that. And if you come to a point where you're willing to burn the bridge and you're willing to blow up the conversation, your next step should be to disengage, and it really shouldn't be to do that, in my opinion. But that's something I'm personally working on and figuring out if that's necessarily correct. Because Destiny, the conversation with him, conversations I've had with I'm Really Important and a few other people, they've kind of tempered my more extreme positions on rhetoric and optics and like, being empathic towards other people. And so I'm figuring out where a realistic approach of that lies. So while I may continue to do that, I don't know if that's the advice I'd give to everybody in every situation. And finding that balance is currently like something I'm personally working on.
Yeah, because these are serious issues, and I think I saw some of and that's what's cool about you too. Instead of right when you got into territory where you didn't feel comfortable kind of like advising Destiny, you said, let me just take a step back, let me think about it. So that's really cool, and it's cool to hear that there's people who are tempering your views and how you need and how you think about things and how you talk to people about stuff. So I'm interested to see how that's going to develop over time, because I know I'm like gassing you up a lot, but you're like the way you speak and the way you think is very strong, and it's cool to imagine that you're going to get even better at that. And that's something I wish I had. You know, like that's why I like watching Destiny. That's why I like watching guys like Sam Cedar and Hassan and Tim Pool and even like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, is the ability to speak at a high level and debate is something I'm really interested in getting better at in general. So, and I know Twitch, like there's something about Twitch where I feel like in normal conversations with people I know in person, like I'm kind of like the superior debater, but on Twitch, like I am low skill. You know, I feel like something about like the Twitch realm, you are constantly sharpening your debate skills, because you're like, let's say you're on Mind Waves every day. They're debating each other every day for hours and hours and hours. They're sharp, you know. Like even though I may think they're wrong, they're sharp debaters. They've had the discussion a bunch of times. You know, they know what their goals are. They know what their beliefs are. Their audience is like reaffirming their beliefs. So I want to be able to make a good impression on them, you know, be allies, and also try to, this sounds, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but like reform their ideas a little bit, de-radicalize for the greater good.
One thing that might be beneficial to point out about your situation now, not having all of that experience and whatever, would be that, remember before how I was talking about there's a divide between experts and novices?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to like to categorize a lot of these problems that way, because I feel like it's a helpful tool or analogy. So remember that right now you would be at this beginner level where you do have this fresh perspective on everything, and you're able to look upon things in a different way than them, who are so entrenched in their own understanding of their arguments and other people's arguments, that when people say something to them, they may come away with a very different opinion than you would. But there's value in your take on that opinion, because you're coming from a place that probably most people would, which is from the more beginner level, or from the more novice to these ideas or arguments. And so I would say that moving forward, just try to keep notes and remember how you feel about new ideas and arguments that are brought to you, and hold on to that, because it's a super important experience that once it's gone, it's gone. Once you know it, you know it. It's very hard to step backwards and take that perspective. So where you're at now, I think remembering how you view everybody from a neutral perspective, and remembering how you feel about these arguments, because that's a super valuable experience. And once you get better at this, it'll be increasingly difficult to take that step back and remember what that was like.
Very well said, man. Very well said. That's a fantastic idea. That's freaking great, man. Okay, I am definitely going to do that, because right now I have the fresh perspective. Like, yeah, and as I begin to like go down the path of developing my goals and maybe deciding I'm a socialist or deciding I'm a libertarian on this platform, it will be hard to look back and have that neutral view. So that's really, really good advice.
Awesome. Well, I hope it all helped.
No, it definitely did, man. It definitely did. But yeah, I think that's all I got for you for now, my brother.
Awesome. Well, I'm Booksmarts. If anybody wants to check me out, I got a twitch.tv/Booksmarts. Just like the conversation here, I want to talk to more people about the way they communicate with others. And if they want help with rhetoric or optics or argumentative approaches, I'm happy to give that to them. So if you guys or any creators you know could use that kind of discussion, or you liked what you saw here, feel free to reach out to them and they could talk to me and yada, yada, yada.
Beautiful. All right, guys, everyone listening, go check out Booksmarts. I mean, if you're not convinced by the end of this conversation, I don't know what else to say. But this guy's awesome. Check him out. Give him a follow. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Bye. You too.
See ya.
See ya.
Guys, how awesome was that? How awesome was that? Did you guys enjoy that?